around. But so the first thing to say is do serve your guests with the right attitude. So I mean, obviously we're all here to serve. We all want to help people. Sometimes it can get a bit tricky and a bit tense in the shelter. It doesn't happen too often, but just bear that in mind and just really come in with just an attitude to serve. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, do chat and get to know the guests. You will, if you're volunteering on a regular basis, whatever role you're in, particularly if you're in the cafe role and the sleepover role, you will get to know the guests quite well. It's really nice. You can build some good relationships and friendships within the boundaries that we'll go through on safeguarding and stuff. So it's really important that you do build relationships and chat to them, because they really appreciate what we're doing as volunteers, and they are sometimes obviously in tricky situations, but it's really nice if you can chat and make them feel welcome. We have both male and female, and we do have vulnerable adults in the shelter. We don't have any children, and no one under 18 can come in, but you need to bear in mind that we do have vulnerable adults, so obviously you need to be careful. And when we come to the safeguarding session, you'll get a bit more on that. We have a team leader for every night, and you'll know who that is, whether you're on the cook team, whether you're a sleepover volunteer, and if you're a cafe volunteer, there'll be someone leading the cafe team. So really, and breakfast team as well. So the really important thing is, if you do think there's any difficulty with a guest and you're really worried, you just talk to the team leader. Don't try and deal with it yourself. It's something that the team leaders have had extra training on, so we can help with that. An important one is probably pretty obvious, but it does happen. Don't give your mobile phone number to guests. If guests need to contact anyone, they can contact the shelter phone, and it's really important that you don't give personal contact details out to guests, even if you think you're getting on really well with them, and you've grown quite friendly with them or whatever, which is fine. You'll be chatting, but please don't give your personal contact information. Mobile, that applies to addresses and email addresses and things as well. Never give the guests money. They may ask for sort of money and saying they need to get somewhere or whatever. It doesn't happen very often. That usually goes through the team leader. We do cover sort of expenses for housing appointments and things, but we don't give them money generally. And when we do that, we do a Oyster card top up, but that's literally for specific appointments. So really important that you don't give them money. If you want to buy them something, for example, I know that people have sort of, maybe someone said they need something and someone's would like to buy them something rather than give them money. Well, that could be okay, but again, because the team leaders know a bit more about the background and the situation of the guests, if you could let them know first, and then they can have a chat about that. Never end up one-to-one with a guest. We have a really strict rule that it's always two volunteers at all times with any guest or group of guests. So it's really important you don't break that from a safeguarding point of view, because there's obvious things that could, sort of accusations and things that could happen. So it's always important to have two people. We do have rules which we'll run through for the different, particularly for sort of sleepover and meal venues, which we'll run through later. But it's really important that you stick to them and that you remind the guests about them as and when. We're not sort of running some sort of ridiculously hard regime. We're just trying to make sure there are boundaries, because when you've got a lot of people and they're there with us a long time, some of them, and there's quite a lot going on in their lives, it's really important that they understand where the boundaries are, and that's just why we have some guidelines for everyone, and we'll run a bit through them. So that's the do's and don'ts. So I just should have said we'll have questions at the end, because we're running through so much this morning. When we get to the end, we'll have questions, or if you're leaving it halfway because you need to get off or whatever, then ask me in the break if you've got any questions. Second area is something that we really want to promote in the shelter this year for you to be aware of as volunteers, and it's pretty scary. I don't know if you know this, but slavery was abolished many years ago, but unfortunately there's about 13,000 people in slavery in the UK at the moment, which is scary, and it happens a lot in homeless shelters. So because they're vulnerable people and because they haven't got anything and they're really, desperate in many situations, and so the gang masters, the criminal gangs that use slaves, will target homeless shelters. I mean, a report highlighted that rough sleepers are at massive risk of becoming victims of modern day slavery. That's well known, and the message is getting out to homeless shelters, which is why I'm sharing it. 64% have said they've come across it within their shelters where people are being exploited. And homeless people are vulnerable to promises of work and accommodation. because obviously they're desperate and they might then get sucked into some sort of criminal gang that's then going to exploit them and basically make them work for nothing, take all their papers, and then literally threaten them if they don't carry on working. And in some cases, they've really got into night shelters and soup kitchens. So you know, obviously we have to be really mindful with all the people that work with us, that we kind of properly check them and make sure that they might that they're actually doing it for the right reasons, and we have to be really careful. And the same with guests as well, because some people might infiltrate the shelters pretending they're a guest in an effort to try and then sort of coerce and get some of the other guests into modern day slavery. So we need to be careful. And I'm going to show you a video now which just gives you a bit more of an insight into how this can happen.
The only way I can describe it is when I was a kid, I got kidnapped from my real dad, and my mum took me off with someone else. And then she left, and me and my sister were left with him. He abused me and my sister. I ended up running away. I've had enough. I got caught a couple of times by the police, got put in care, but I didn't like that. And then when I was about 13, I ended up going to London with a rucksack, wearing shorts and flip-flops in the middle of winter. I got in with the wrong crowd. I ended up taking drugs, abusing alcohol. That's what made me vulnerable. That's what makes other homeless people vulnerable, because of what's happened in the past. I didn't want to turn out to be a drug user or an alcoholic, but I did it to numb the pain, and I got hooked on it. And then I got targeted by traffickers. The first time they approached me, it sounded really good. They promised me 40 quid a day to go to work from, plus alcohol or drugs if I needed it, but it didn't work out like that. They said the work was labouring, but first we had to find the jobs. They'd buy us clothes from charity shops, like a tie, white shirt, trousers. We'd walk around neighbourhoods looking for work, knocking on doors, sometimes for 12, 15 hours a day. Our shoes were falling off when we were walking. There were holes in them, but they just didn't care. And then when we got a job, we'd have to do it. I did block paving, tarmacking, gardening, roofing. The roofing was the worst, because I'm petrified of heights and there was no health and safety. There were no hats, no proper equipment. You got shown once and you just had to get on with it and get it done. We weren't getting fed at all, really. They give you enough to keep you going. Sandwiches mostly. Most of the time we slept in the back of vans and sometimes ended up in a tent. You couldn't get showers half the time and you're so tired, but you didn't hardly go to sleep anyway because you didn't know if there'd be a bang on the door, someone coming to beat you up again. They'd be fighting all the time. It was horrible. A lot of people say when they drop you off for work and you're knocking on all these doors, why don't you ask one of them to call the police? But they're going to know it's you. They're going to find you. And they say, why can't you run? Run where? You've got no phone, no ID, no money. You can't forget the fear too. One time, I did run away. I managed to blag a lift. I can't remember how. I got myself out the area, but they found me. 3 of them surrounded me in town. We were right next to a shop with big windows. They got round me and said, if you don't come with us now, you'll go through that window. And I knew they weren't messing about. We pulled into a petrol station and a cop car literally just pulled into the space next to us. And the guy who was in the car with me, he said, if you say anything, I'll kill you in this car. And I was so petrified I couldn't say anything. Even though they were just there, I couldn't risk it. I was too scared. And people ask, why does it happen to you so many times? It's because they target you when you're drunk. And it's wet and cold and you're hungry and someone's offering you work and a drink at 3 o'clock in the morning, you jump on it. The penny don't drop because all you're thinking is you ain't got a drink in your bag. But soon the cycle starts again. Now I see the traffickers in day centres looking for workers. I do the soup kitchen once in a while and I remember seeing 2 youngsters being approached by 2 men. They offered them work. I went over later and warned them off. I said, you don't want to do that because it's not true. What they're saying to you is not true. I thought to myself, if I weren't there that day, they would have ended up being trafficked. I say to people who work with homeless, you've got to look out for the signs. If you see people coming in the building offering work, just think, why would they try and find workers at a soup run? It's over 5 years now since I was last sleeping rough. My faith has helped a lot, and having Christian friends around. I was easily led when I was growing up, but I've learned to stay with good people. But it's still difficult. I've been out of it for a few years, but I'm always looking over my shoulder, and I will do for the rest of my life.